Come on, do we really have to make this? We have to make this video? We have to do it now? Yeah, dude, you promised everyone you'd be uploading on every Friday, and last time I checked, it's almost 1 a.m. and you're supposed to be uploading in a few hours. So yeah, you got to do this video.
Yeah, I know, but I just don't know.
No.
Nope.
Stop. It's midnight, and you got to upload this video in like 7 hours. Let's get to it. Okay, I guess we're doing this. What's up, everybody? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 6 times I totally screwed up on gigs. A lot of times when I take you guys along on some of these shows, whether it's a corporate event or some sort of festival or bus tour, any type of those shows, any video that I publish to YouTube, generally those are the kind of shows where nothing goes wrong. And the reason that I publish those is because I actually have the spare time to be wielding a camera around and documenting the process. So keep in mind that the videos that I publish on YouTube of the gig logs, or where we go and do a festival show, those by definition pretty much have to be the shows where nothing goes wrong. For every gig video that I post on my channel here, there are probably 5 to 6 other videos that were at least started but could never be finished because my job primarily when I'm going out and doing these shows is not to be wielding a stupid camera around. It's to make sure that the show goes off properly and that my client is satisfied. And if you work in production, you know that more often than not, things get screwed up and require attention from every department on every show. No matter what show you're working on, there are always problems that arise that need to be worked on in real time. So in today's video, I thought I would share with you a couple of those screw-ups that still keep me up at night. As many of you know, I have a bit of a side hustle business where I rent out DJ backline, speakers, CDJs, all sorts of random odds and ends. And I have a couple of really good repeat clients here in Seattle. In fact, I have a client that is so regular that at the beginning of each season, they will send me a texted list of dates that they want me to reserve. And it's the same setup pretty much every time. I love these gigs because they're super simple one-man operation type deals. There's like a little bit of sprinkling of extra gigs throughout my schedule where I can just take an hour or two, go set up a rig, and then come back later that night and tear it down. This event was perfectly sandwiched in my weekend of gigs because the night before I was going to be in a different city doing a tour show for one of the artists that I work with. I was going to fly back to Seattle, head directly to the shop in the morning, and then go and set up the backline rig that they needed at the venue. However, when I originally booked all these dates into my calendar, I booked them all as the same identical setup because that's usually what it is. But they had requested a specific change to a much larger setup with more equipment, more complexity, because they had a special event for this one particular date. And I went to update it on my laptop while I was out on the road in my Google spreadsheet that I use to keep track of all of these gigs. And little did I know at the time that my computer was not connected to Wi-Fi and that spreadsheet was not updated. One of the worst parts about this screw up is that the client had trusted me so much with all their previous gigs that we had gotten to the point where they didn't even bother really checking in with me to make sure that everything was okay or that everything was set up. I would just show up to the venue, load in, set up all the equipment, and then peace out and come back later. Super easy. So I finished setting up all the gear and I started driving home because I'm tired. I just did a gig in another city, flew back, set up this whole other backline setup, and I'm driving home to go take a wonderful nap. And I'm halfway home and I see that I'm getting a call. Of course, it's my client contact, and I answer thinking, I didn't know what to think. I didn't think anything was wrong. Hey man, how's it going? I'm just looking at the setup here, and did you know that we're doing the way more complex setup with totally different gear today? So at this point, I basically do a U-turn on the interstate and begin heading directly back to the venue. The worst part about this is that this was one of the busiest weekends that I had the whole year for rentals, and basically all of my other equipment was rented out. So I finally get over to the shop and begin grabbing what's left of the gear that I have in stock, since this is one of the busiest rental weekends that I had all year, of course. As I'm heading back to the shop to go grab everything I possibly can to make this work, I realize that I'm going to be short 2 CDJs because like literally everything in the whole shop was rented out. So my brilliant solution, if I couldn't find someone to get me a pair of their CDJs to rent for the day, was to go and buy a pair of CDJs from the local guitar center. And by pure luck, I got back to the shop and noticed that a pair of CDJs that were supposed to be picked up by someone else a couple days prior were never picked up, and that they canceled their show. So I'm sitting here looking at these two CDJs as like, oh my God, the ultimate savior. I don't have to go and run to Guitar Center and be even more late on this setup, because at this point I'm racing the clock for their doors to be open. So I get to the venue, and this is like one of the busiest weekends of the whole year. I can't find parking, so I illegally park my car, start running all the gear up and down. I had to make like 2 trips, finally get upstairs with all of the gear, and everyone's kind of staring at me because I'm the guy who's bringing all of this gear up and like sweating profusely. So I spend the next 5 minutes just unplugging and replugging DJ setups and getting it all checked out and making sure that it works. And everything is plugged in and everything is working, and their DJ can finally start. Usually those shows are pretty set and forget. I don't have to have an operator on hand to run the show. But for this instance, since I know I screwed up really bad and everyone was kind of nervous about the rest of the equipment working properly, I wanted to make sure that I stayed there for the whole event, and everything went fine after that. But the whole time, man, there's nothing like hanging your head in shame, showing up to a venue while everyone is staring at you and you have to unplug and replug a new DJ system in. That's pretty embarrassing. All right, moving on to our next screw up. This one will be a little more brief. This was when we were visiting Firefly Music Festival with Lewis the Child. We had a pretty basic ground package that I had designed and drawn up, just essentially something that we could have unique for our own sets that wasn't just the festival rig, and we needed to keep the budget very, very low. So in order to keep the build in budget, I offered to do the ground package build solo as a dry hire. So the lighting company would just bring us the cases full of lighting and cable and the truss pieces that we needed, and I would build it with our set of stagehands with none of the lighting company's techs. On the original design, I had spec'd fixtures that I knew had PowerCon in and out, not True One, regular blue and white PowerCons, regular Color Force 72s, and Elation WW4s. And when we were sent the final gear list by the vendor, I went through, looked at everything, and didn't notice that the Color Forces had been swapped out for Color Force Mark IIs, which have a True One input on them, which isn't a problem. Adapters are totally a thing, but when I showed up and noticed that we had Color Force Mark IIs, I realized that someone would have to be making a shop run unless by some grace of God they decided to include the adapters in our cable pull, which they weren't, which is totally not on them. I created the cable pull list under the impression that we were getting the Color Force Mark 1s. I didn't notice that they were subbed out for Mark 2s, so totally my bad. This was kind of a double gut punch though, because we had been under a storm advisory for pretty much our entire festival build, and I'm doing the whole thing solo with a couple of stagehands, and I don't have the right adapters. So I had to build as much as I could and just kind of hope and pray that the guys could make a run back to the shop, grab me the right adapters, which they did just in time. I think we ended up getting our final set of adapters about an hour before our changeover. So not a major disaster. Everything ended up working out in the end, but all of these things always somehow end up working out in the end anyways. Okay, this next one is a big one that still makes me cringe to think about. It was my first ever timecode tour with, again, Lewis the Child, and we were doing a homecoming show for me at WAMU Theater in Seattle. So totally no pressure. I think this was one of our top 2 selling venues on the whole tour as well. Anyways, we go through load in, we do sound check, we run through everything, and everything's functioning perfectly as it should, as it always does, right? The openers all do their thing, and eventually it's time for our changeover. Changeover is going well. It's not a massive changeover. We got a couple risers to move, a couple things to check up on the DJ deck. I'm sitting out in front of house, enjoying the view as the audience is completely full in WAMU Theater. We go to check show control, and I am not getting any timecode signal. In fact, nobody's getting any timecode signal. Scott's not getting timecode for Resolume, and I'm not getting timecode for MA. So we start going into troubleshooting mode as any good tech would do. And to make things even weirder, we unplug the audio interfaces from show control and we can hear the timecode coming out through the speakers, which is what it's supposed to do. So we know we're getting good connection over the network to the CDJs, but it's just somehow not getting into our audio interfaces. We see levels on all of the inputs, and we see that everything is configured how we've always had it configured. So at this point, we're digging through Pelicans and plugging in backup sound cards, and still nothing is working. At this point, everyone at front of house is starting to freak out because we've run past our changeover time, and that's a big no-no. It becomes a bit of a circus with everybody running around trying to offer advice even though they don't know what's already been tried or how the whole system is supposed to work. So that adds more distraction to our workload. And after about 10 minutes of trying to troubleshoot this problem, we straight up could not figure it out. And when that happens and you have no time code to trigger visuals or lighting, you have to revert back to manual operation, which isn't the end of the world. But when you spend so much time working on the time code for a show and you're in your hometown and you want it to look exactly how you and your artist envisioned it, it's a huge blow. And the worst part about this one is after we decided to just say YOLO and run the show manually, doing some busking and then just running through the cue list for the songs, all of our friends who were attending said that, oh man, that was one of the coolest shows I've ever seen. And it's just like, oh my God, you guys, if you only knew how much better the show actually was, I don't think you'd be saying that. And as soon as the show ended, we immediately began dissecting what happened. And it turns out that on the audio interfaces that we were using, the iConnectivity Audio 4s, there is a touchscreen on the front panel, which is unmarked. You would never know it's a touchscreen. And if you hit it in the right place, it mutes the inputs, but you can still see the levels of the inputs on the front of the device. So just one of those things where a small detail about a piece of equipment that we were using led to us not having a time-coded show. Now, of course, we always have a backup, and the ultimate backup for if shit totally hits the fan and you don't have time code, it's having your busking skills and having your manual operation skills sharp. Okay, here's a big MA2 screw up that I'm super embarrassed by. Out on tour, a lot of times we will have support acts that don't have their own lighting or sound techs to run their show. And that's totally okay. A lot of smaller artists just don't have the budget to have their own team of people to go to these shows with them. So many times I'll end up running the openers in exchange for a couple of bucks. It's a fine arrangement. And since I'm using the same show file that I run the headliners on, one of the things I do to limit the amount of access the opening act has to the entire rig is I'll create a group master that restricts the output of a selection of fixtures. So basically that means that I'll create a group of all the lights that I don't want the opening act to have access to. Just because we don't want to use the whole rig until the headliner is on, since they're the ones paying for the whole tour, so they should get the full impact of their rig. But the openers still need some lights, so I'll usually leave the overhead washes on, leave a couple of spots or beams and a couple strobes on for me to still busk along with my regular show file, but it just turns everything else off. So the direct opener finishes their act. I'm done doing the lights for them, and I switch over into my changeover cue list. And as I switch over into the changeover cue list, I start highlighting through all the different fixtures in the rig. I put them in a straight out kind of down position, and I start highlighting through them, just checking through everything, basically just a channel check. Make sure all the lamps are still struck, make sure everything is in the right position. And everything's looking good. Nexting through everything. Okay, yeah. Everything looks good. Make a few tweaks here and there. Yep, everything's responding. Everything's moving. Okay, awesome. Well, I highlighted through everything. And yeah, we're ready for our set. Time code looks good. All relaxed on that front. Don't have to worry about that anymore. And yeah, we're go for show. So the main act goes on. And part of their philosophy for these light shows is they start super minimal, and they build the show over the course of the first 30 minutes, where the whole rig isn't all on at once, which is really cool for creating an ambience of unpredictability, and it adds a little bit of surprise through different parts of the set. You don't just get one big climax at the start and then ride that whole energy all the way through. You have peaks and valleys. Makes sense. So the intro track is rolling. I've got good time code. The video's all working splendidly. Everything's looking good. Lights are reacting as they should. We're going through a couple songs, and I start to notice that some of the fixtures are not turning on when they're supposed to. And I look and I'm squinting, and I see that they're moving. And I can even see some of the inside of the optics, the front lens. You can see the color filters moving inside of it. And I start to kind of panic a little bit, like, wait, those lights are supposed to be on during this cue. So I start selecting them in my layout view. I hit highlight and they come on, and I go to turn highlight off and then roll the dimmer wheel up, and the dimmer wheel won't come on. It'll only come on during highlight. And so I start testing some other fixtures. I clear out rapidly. I grab another fixture that is currently working, and I hit highlight and it's responding appropriately, and I can dim it down. And then I start going through a couple different fixtures to see if it's maybe like a universe that has been messed up or unplugged, but that wouldn't make any sense because I see them moving correctly and the screens aren't blinking to show that the DMX is lost. And this whole time the show is running, like the artists are up there doing the show, video is playing back, audio is very loud, subs are booming, and I'm just sitting there like looking through everything, trying to figure out what is wrong. And after struggling with this for about another minute, trying to figure out why these lights aren't coming on when they're supposed to, it finally hits me. I look down and I see in the message center on the MA command line the group master icon. And at that point, I just get so mad at myself. I instantly know what the problem is. I left the group master for the opening act down, and it was buried on another page that I wasn't even looking at because I had switched pages and I assigned that group kind of on the fly. And by the time the timecode started playing, it had flipped to a new page and it was no longer a fader that was visible on my page. So I see that warning icon. I immediately hold down the group button. If you hold down the group button, your screen will pop up with the group masters section, so you can immediately see what group masters are active and what level they're at. And I look down, and sure enough, my group master for the openers is all the way down. Ugh, that's one of those things that has become ingrained in my own personal checklist when we're going through for our changeovers. It's happened to me once, and it will never, ever, ever happen to me again. It's just so stupid. All right, we're cruising through the list here. Number 5, this is a little bit of a different problem, still applicable to what we're talking about. One of my first shows that I ever actually designed, I think this was the first show after I bought my capture license back in 2017, something like that. Maybe 2016 even at this point. It was a Halloween show called Shadows, and it was pretty basic design, I'll be honest. It's 2 sticks of truss and a couple arches. Nothing crazy, but it was my first actual stage design that got put out into the real world, so I was very proud of it. But unfortunately, I grossly underestimated the amount of labor I would need to build the stage. And the stagehands that were hired by the labor company were unfortunately some of the most apathetic people that I've had to work with. I know it's kind of a badge of honor in the stage production world to work insanely long hours and long days, but for me, this one was one of the most physically and emotionally draining I think I've ever had. We started work at 5 a.m. the morning of the show and ended up stopping around 2 p.m. After the day after the show. So I think if I do the math on that, we're just short of 36 hours. In fact, at the time, I had one of those Fitbits on my wrist. Yeah, I was one of those people for a minute. And I'll have to look up my exact count, but I believe it was about 32 or 36,000 steps for just that one day. Looking back on it, we were probably about 50% shy on the number of hands that we needed to properly build the ground-supported truss structure. But in the end, the show happened. And it's actually a very, very fond memory of mine, that whole experience. Following that one up with a rather unfond memory, oh man, this one's bad too. This was at a music festival. This was more of a run and gun situation, a busking show, if you will. There was no time code, nothing to worry about on that front. but a very, very short programming slot. We're talking like 30 minutes. I then went back to the hotel room and began adding some more programming and pretty much doing whatever I could on PC with a touchscreen laptop. And I even continued working on the show file on my laptop all the way up until our changeover time. So I have the laptop out at front of house, making changes, making new effects, storing new executors, stuff that I just think will add that little extra to the show. So I'm programming, and I look down and I see my battery is like very close to dying. I'm like, I've got my charger, right? So I reach in my backpack. Oh shoot, I don't have my charger. Oh well, no worries. I'll just save the show file. This will be good enough for now. Save the show file to the local drive. Everything is fine. Go to plug in this exact flash drive. Plug it in, hit the backup menu, select the drive, hit save. I'm watching the progress bar on the bottom, and right as the progress bar completes and flashes, the computer completely dies, battery exhausted. So I'm sitting there at a blank screen. It's like literally Black Mirror, like the Black Mirror is facing me in the face right now. And I'm like, oh, well, I saw the show file save. So I carefully take my flash drive, close the computer, put it away. And I look at the time and we've got like 10 minutes till changeover. And this particular changeover was not on the order of minutes, but on the order of seconds. I'm talking this changeover was like 15 seconds long. So it's time for the changeover, and I confidently go up to the MA2, plug in my flash drive, hit backup, and I see my show file is sitting right at the top, right where it should be. I confidently tap on the name of the show, check all, and uncheck the network configuration settings, and load my show. Takes a few seconds, yeah, okay, normal. And when my show file loads, I am presented with a completely blank screen. It's as if I had created a brand new show file. There's nothing in the patch. There are no pages. There's no nothing, completely blank MA. At this point, I have about 5 seconds until the act goes on. At this point, I know I have 3 show files. I have the one on the flash drive that will not load, even though it shows up as having the proper size, about 12 megabytes. I have that show file that won't load on the MA. I have the show file on my laptop, which is dead, but I know saved correctly. And then I have my backup flash drive, you know, that little stick of like four flash drives that I've talked about in previous videos. I have those from my first programming session, which don't have any of the hours of time I spent adding additional programming into the set. And I only have a few seconds to make up my mind on what I'm going to do. Instead of taking my chances and potentially wasting more time and having no lights on the stage for the artist, I swallowed my ego and leaned over to the house LD, briefly explained to him that my show file is corrupted and that I need to load his show file and attempt to learn it as I go. And I feel awful, I can't remember his name, but he was super understanding and quickly loaded up his show file and gave me like the first 5 minutes of training on how to use it while the show was starting. And so that was stressful. The show happened, and again, nobody knew the difference. Like that's the worst part about this is a lot of times people who aren't lighting designers who watch your show, they don't really know the difference between a good show and a bad show, which is kind of disheartening sometimes, but that's unfortunately the reality. So there we have it, 6 times I totally screwed up on a gig. Hope you could learn something from this list. And before we go, I wanted to share a bonus screw up. And this is, this is the worst one of the entire list. You gotta save the best for last, and this is no exception. And that show is Bass Canyon 2019 with Zomboy headlining. This whole screw up was because I did not have the time nor resources to properly prepare for a one-off set that was radically different than a tour set that we had been running for the previous couple of months. The Bass Canyon show was about 40% the same as our tour show, which we already had mostly time coded. However, this was going to be my first time doing both lighting and video at the same time. The whole idea behind me running both video and lights is that we would have essentially pre-made time-coded video tracks where I would just have to trigger them and they would play back automatically. And I wouldn't have to really touch anything. I'd just have to worry about the lighting, which is what I know best. I can operate Resolume, I can play back stuff, I can assign time code to it. But when it comes to busking Resolume, definitely not my strong suit. I spent the entire week prior to this show testing out different configurations, making sure the time code worked, making sure that all of our new video clips worked, making my own video clips, assigning them in show control. And I literally ran through the entire set 5 or 6 times a day, adding new programming, making sure the lighting worked, everything. I wanted this to be one of the best shows that I'd ever had. So finally it came time for the day of the show. We all loaded up in the transport van and headed out to the beautiful gorge. Seriously, it's one of the best venues in the whole world. I'd even brought a CDJ along with us to the green room to test out his stick right after we exported it from Rekordbox to make sure there were no discrepancies at all in the offsets or the track names. And we would load up tracks on the CDJ, click through them, and hit play, make sure the offsets all worked. Everything was golden. It finally comes time for our set, and I throw on my backpack and drag my Pelican out through the crowd to front a house where I find all of my friends waiting. It was completely packed with people who I respect and people who I've grown friendships with over the years. And it comes time for our show, and I have about 2 minutes to do changeover. So I'm setting up the laptop, plugging in the audio interface, routing all of the SMPTE output cables both to the MA and then to the audio card for the Resolume laptop. And everything is looking good. I test everything. Good time code here, good time code there. All of the lights are working. Okay, good. Deep breath. This is going to be a good show. And then the first song of the set hits, and I start seeing the SMPTE time marker in Resolume start skipping around and doing this little jittery jumping thing. And of course, when that's happening, when you see that little cursor jittering around on your clip playback timeline, it's doing the same thing on the LED screen. And so I look down at the console. I see that the time code on the console is running correctly. The light show is going. And so I start going once again into troubleshoot mode to figure out why Resolume is seeing all of this skipping. I'm in and out of the different preferences. I'm changing the sampling rate. I'm changing the SMPTE frame rate to 2997. And every time I would hit enter and change a setting, I would look and everything would stabilize. Everything would be smooth, crispy. I'd look up at the screen. Oh, okay, it's working. That's it. I fixed it. And within the next few minutes, it would slowly get worse and worse. So I see the issue start to propagate once again. It's kind of like building on itself and getting worse and worse. And I eventually decide that I cannot trust the input, the SMPTE input to Resolume to be reliable. So I turn it off and start busking video, which again, totally not my strong suit. The whole reason we had set up this arrangement for me to use the time or the show control rig with the programming that we had for lighting for the tour was so that I wouldn't have to do the video busking, but we could still have the time-coded video show. So after 10 minutes of battling with the software and trying to get some combination of settings to work permanently, I had gone through all 5 stages of grief and I had accepted that it just wasn't going to work. So I turned off the timecode and started manually busking the video for the tracks where I had timecode sorted on the console, and that was all playing back. But that still left about 40% of tracks where I had no timecode for either lighting or video. I had to do both at the same time with just a laptop that had no DMX mapping, no MIDI mapping whatsoever. I literally had to click through cues and change sliders on screen. So at this point, everything is unraveling fairly quickly, at least in my mind. I am very stressed, and I know a lot of my friends are out there watching me be incredibly stressed. And this is one of those situations where it's tempting, even for me, if I see someone else in the situation, to try to jump in and help in any sort of way. And thankfully, my good friend Brady, he's Excision's visuals guy. He was out there as well, and he tried to help in whatever way he could. He was in show control, helping me change settings, but like literally nothing was working. And once I accepted that it wasn't going to work, I basically used show control as a monitor and a playback for whatever remaining lighting time code we had. But like I said, there were still sections of the set where we did not have either lighting or video time coded for new songs that had literally never been played before. So long story short, it was a super mediocre to bad quality show on my behalf. I felt awful about it, and it's that is the one show that sticks out in my mind, literally sticks out in my mind at night when I go to sleep sometimes, just like thinking about that whole scenario and all the things I could have done to keep that from happening. I thought I had done everything that I needed to do, including testing everything at home for a full week through various scenarios, various combinations of songs. I'd even set up my track automation sequence at this point so that I didn't even have to select the track. It automatically knew when to switch the track over. And I was confident that this was going to be a good result, and it just wasn't. So to wrap things up here, I hope that sharing some of my more notable or cringe-worthy mistakes has maybe helped you avoid some of these issues in the future. We all know that experience is the best teacher, and there will be your own experiences that come up that you won't be able to foresee and that you will learn from. Okay, enough pontificating. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. I'd love to hear down in the comments below, what is one show that you've screwed up that still keeps you up at night? And make sure to check out the link to my Twitch channel down below in the description. I'm now live streaming 4 days a week over on Twitch, so make sure to come check out all the fun we're having over there. And if you haven't heard yet, this Sunday, the weekend that I'm publishing this video, we are having our Ultimate Shootout fundraiser. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, again, all the links are down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.